Hey drummers, it's Rob Litton here from drumstheword.com and welcome to this free full song video drum lesson. Today I'm going to be showing you how to play the full song, every bar, every part of the song, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon, drummed of course by the legendary Steve Gadd. And unlike other lessons on YouTube or online where they just focus on the main drum beat, including myself, which I did a video for about 7-8 years ago, this time I'm going to show you the entire song because there's a lot more going on than just the main drum beat. Within the verses, there are actually subtle things going on there as well. And then of course we've got the choruses, those funky choruses as well, which I want to go over with you just to show how great and subtle Steve Gadd's playing is. And as always, with all my free lessons and full song lessons, you get the full PDF drum chart. I've got 3 pages, the full song for you, which you can download for free, have it in front of you as we go through this lesson together. You'll find a link for that beneath this video. And just if you're interested, this song was suggested over on my Facebook page. So if you want to go over there to make your own song suggestions, again, you'll find a link beneath this video, then that's a great place to do it. Okay, so 102 BPM. The song starts with Gadd on drums. Paul Simon was obviously very, very impressed with this drum beat and said, Steve, go for it. You're going to start the song and you're going to end the song with this distinctive drum beat. And it really is completely unique. It's a wonderful, wonderful drum groove that takes a little bit of practice to get going, but once you've got it locked into muscle memory, it's not as bad as you think. So it starts off with this little double on the snare drum, taking us into the first bar. That double occurs on the and a beat 4, 2 sets of 30-second notes, right, right, left, left. And that's how Steve plays it, right, right, as doubles, right, right, left, left. You could play it as singles, absolutely fine. If you want to play it as singles, you can do that instead. But have a go at the double version first. You might find it easier, surprisingly. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm not really counting I'm just hearing it 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 1, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 1. And we go into the first bar of the 2-bar groove, which everyone else has talked about, but we'll go over again briefly now as well. So we go into the hi-hat and bass drum coming down on beat 1, 1. Then we get this linear pattern of notes. And that's what gives this groove its wonderful feel, is that there's a line of notes going across. The hi-hat is playing a syncopated group across the beat of the bar as well. So I'll just show you beat by beat. We get 1, E, and. Now, let me interrupt myself there. I'm going to be looking like I'm playing like a normal person in this lesson because I'm going to be crossing my arm over like this. Your hi-hat would be over here, so it's exactly the same sticking as I'll be showing you, except instead of doing this, you'll be doing this. So you'll probably find this easier to play because it's more open-handed. Your left hand's going to come up to the hi-hat to play these hi-hat notes. And you can see I've written the notation for the sticking underneath each of these beats. So we get 1, E, and 1, E, and the hi-hat foot is being used here as an extra hi-hat note. 1, E, and that's the key to it. 1, E, and then 2, E, and 2, E, and 3 into this floor tom. Now this song requires 2 toms. Like Steve plays, he plays 2 floor toms for this song. I've seen it online. He might have changed his setup over the years, but this is how he played it on the recording, it seems. That floor tom there, and then we're also going to use the lower floor tom. If you want to change that floor tom into this tom in front of you, and then when you do the double bit in a second, you go to the lowest floor tom, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you're using the higher pitch of the toms, of the 2 toms you're using for this first bar, and then in the second bar, which we'll go over in a second, use the 2 toms together. Okay, so we get 1 E and 2 E and 3 into the floor tom there, 3. 2 bass drums, 3, 3. Then we go over to beat 4 and we got this rather cool little rudimental kind of snare drum thing where basically it's 4 E and but what he does is he doubles up the first note, 4 E and 4 E and Again, you could use single stroke, right, left, right, but you end up on your right hand, so you might want to start it with your left hand if you do single stroke. But the double thing makes it easier for me to play in a way because I'm not really thinking about that so much. I'm just thinking right, left, and just doubling the first note. Up to speed. It's a cool idea because you stay on the right hand lead maintains. So that first bar, 1 E and 2 E and 3 and 4 E and Then we go into the next bar, which starts exactly the same. 1 E and 2 E and, but then we get a 3, clever idea this, he doesn't go to the floor tom, he waits, we just get the 3 on the bass drum, then we wait for beat 4, 2 lowest toms, 4 on beat 4, and then back to the snare drum for that and little 30-second notes lick at the beginning of the song, which occurs here at the end of every 2 bars. So if we take bars 1 and 2, this is our main drum beat. This is what you could get away with playing the whole song, even though there are subtle changes throughout the songs we go over. This is what you could play. So taking it nice and slowly, and like I said, when you first try playing this, you'll be like, what? But then when you start to repeat it, and make sure you play it slowly to start off with so you're repeating it correctly each time, it starts to sink into muscle memory and your arms sort of start to learn it. It becomes easier, basically, like any practice. So here we go. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and even slower, and then I'll start speeding it up. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and I accidentally played, because I'm counting out loud and concentrating because of recording, I accidentally played the floor tom there on beat 3. And I found this quite a lot, I was sometimes missing out that floor tom on beat 3 or then putting it in the second bar accidentally. You're going to find you'll probably do the same until it's really locked down as one pattern. And if you do that kind of thing through the song, then don't worry about it too much, because you know it's still going to sound correct. It won't be the version here on the recording, but it's still in time, it's still a cool groove. So let yourself off. I found that I was doing that accidentally quite a bit. Anyway, that's my excuse out the way. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1. Now, also one thing to point out, which is a subtle thing, usually I would consider myself to be a bit of a rock drummer. I like to play hard, I like to play rim shots on the snare drum, but in order for this song to sound correct, I had to resist that urge, and I'm playing very lightly on the snare drum and very lightly on the toms. It gives it a different feel. If you're playing rim shots on the snare, rim shots on the floor tom, it's not going to sound correct. Steve is playing very lightly on the snare drum and very lightly on the toms, and the same for the choruses as well. God, that's fun to play. So have a go at that, loop that round, get that comfortable, because that's going to be the skeleton, that's going to be the key part of this song. So going on to the second line, I've written here 2 bar repeats. So basically that's the same drum beat, the 2 bars. We're thinking that those 2 bars as one groove now. Those 2 bars get played again. And then I've written out the next 2 bars, not using a repeat, because we get our first difference here, our first change. If you look at the second bar of the 2 bar drum beat, basically the last bar of line 2, we get 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4. Instead of going and going into the next section, he leaves this big gap, which is wonderful, really, really cool musical choice, because it's just before the guitars enter. Instead of a drum fill, he chooses to play nothing instead, which is brilliant. And it just leaves a lovely bit of space, because the song's so open anyway, lovely bit of space for and then we're into the next line, 1, where we go back to the 2 bar groove normally. I've written for the third line, note guitars enter, so you know roughly where you are. So those last 2 bars, then we're back to the hi-hat instead of, it's just really, really cool. So before we go on, I just want to play this up to speed for you so you can hear just the drums without the microphone on. Oh, by the way, I've also written at the top of the chart here, note the tambourine is played on the and of each beat during the verses. So I'm sure you weren't confused by that, but if you're hearing this that's the tambourine being played. That's not Steve playing anything on the kit. That was added over the top after the recording. So anyway, the first 2 lines of the drum beat going into the third line of the intro, up to speed without the microphone on so you can hear just the drums. Here we go. So the third line, that 2-bar drum beat gets repeated twice. The next line, we get another 2-bar pattern being repeated, and then the second time for that second line, fourth line of the intro, we got our next change. And you notice at the end of that line, it's just 4 again. It's the same idea as we had before, 4, before we go into verse 1, where I believe the vocals come in. So again, Steve's marking every 4 bars by not playing anything. So we get 4, and then we're into verse 1, the next line, where we go back to our standard 2-bar drum beat. And you can see it's repeated, those 2 bars, 4 times for the first line, and then 4 bars for the second line. But for the second line, at the end of that 2-bar pattern, instead of playing 4 and he just plays 4 and he leaves out those two toms. So a very, very subtle difference there. Instead of playing 4 and, it's just 4 and. It's a very subtle difference there. Then the last line of page 1, we get the 2-bar pattern being repeated, but notice the second bar, we get a 3, and then instead of playing 4 and, we just wait for the and to fall, because we're going to go into our first chorus. So again, a big gap being left there, a 3 and 4 and we're into the open hi-hat with your normal sticking right hand, with left hand if you're left-handed, and into chorus 1 on page 2. And I've written here, note, feel free to add in your own ghost notes as Steve does. The important obvious ones have been included below. So what I mean by that is that Steve is definitely playing more ghost notes than I've written on the chart, but I couldn't be 100% sure exactly where they are because they're so quiet and subtle. I didn't want to give you incorrect information. So what I've done is I've just given you the ones that I can definitely hear, and then you can sort of feel around with your own ghost notes. So when I demonstrate for you this in a second, it's going to sound a little bit emptier than you do here on the recording, because Steve is definitely playing very, very subtle little ghost notes underneath, and you can explore your own ghost note patterns. But like I said, I've written the obvious ones here on the page that jump out, and I think giving all these different examples here in combination will give you all the ideas that Steve uses. So what we're doing is we're playing 8th notes on the hi-hat, but he's accenting the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You could just play the ands on their own, 1 and 2 and 3 and, but that makes it a little bit empty, and that's not what Steve is playing. He's playing 1 and 2 and, so you might want to work on that technique, the ability to play 8th notes and accent the ands, because then underneath it with our left hand we're also going to be playing some ghost notes, and you might find the lining up of the notes with this upbeat pattern new to you. You might be used to playing, but have you ever played? It might be a completely different, well, it will be a completely different feel if you've never tried it. So my advice is practice the basic drum beat, the first bar as we see it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. See, the bass drum is very subtly playing on all four notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and snare drum on 2 and 4. That's our basic drum beat for the chorus. That's the minimum you should be able to play to make it sound like the song. Then you can work on each of the different bars and on their own in isolation, just working on adding one snare drum in, one ghost note in, one drag in. So if we take a look at the second bar, we get our first example of this, where we get the first ghost note that pops out to me, obviously, on the of 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and these ghost notes do have to be quiet. The ones I haven't written in brackets are played normal volume, but even they are being played not as rim shots, remember, just the centre of the snare drum, just with the stick. I'm not playing. So very, very subtle. 1 and 2 and then he plays 3 and 4 with the bass drum. 3 and 4 and these extra bass drum notes are also added throughout the choruses to add a bit more push with the bass guitar. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And the last time I mention it, if you want to leave out the ghost notes and the drags completely, that's absolutely fine. But try to keep the bass drum notes in, because that will give the push, the chorus, the push in the right places. But then you don't have to worry about playing the extra snare drum notes, but maintain that upbeat hi-hat feel. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Third bar, standard groove. Then the fourth bar, we get a snare drum pop out on the E of beat 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 E and. You can see the movement there, 3 E and. I'm using the molar whip here with the right hand. And by the way, you can Google loads of videos on this technique. It's called the molar technique. This is the molar whip, and this helps me to maintain those accents without me thinking about it. It's a muscle memory. It's a movement that I've learned and practiced over the years, and then play different variations, bass drum, snare drum patterns underneath it. So I'm not thinking about it. It's a movement, it's a molar technique whip action, and the whip action ensures that I get that accent. If I'm just playing, I'm having to think quite loud, but if I'm using the molar whip, it's up, down, and the down just naturally becomes louder, and the up is just naturally quieter. So it does the dynamics for me. So that fourth bar, 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4, and then we get a little open hi-hat there on the and of 4. 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1. 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1. Next line, we got 3 bars of standard groove. The fourth bar, 1 E and 1 E and 2. A snare drum on the E of 1 there in between the hi-hats. 1 E and 2. And then I think he's playing, Steve, I think he plays a 3 and 4. What I mean by that is the bit, the 3. I think he's playing a 3. It could just be 3 and 4, and I'm hearing the bass guitar, because the bass drum is very low in the mix, but I think he plays 1 E and 2 and a 3 and 4. 1 E and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 E and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. When you slow it down like that, you can see the movement. It's really weird. 1 E and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 E and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. If you just want to play 3 and 4, that's absolutely fine, but I think it's a 3 and 4. Okay, the third line, first bar, we get a ghost note on the of 2, 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4, very subtle. Bar 2, we get 3 E and 4, and the bass drum's playing 3 and 4 underneath it. 3 E and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 and. Third bar standard, fourth bar we get 1 and 2 and and then the clever idea here, Steve pulls back with the bass drum, waits for the and of 3 with the bass guitar, and we get and 4 and. Open hi-hat there at the end. And 4 and 1. And 4 and. Doesn't help it stays so hot in here as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on there on that third line. Let's just play it slowly. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, a 3 and 4 and 1. Then the last line is just 3 bars long, so look out for that. We go into the verse 2 earlier than you expect. 3 bars of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And then, and I recommend you practice this as well, going from the last bar into the original drum beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And I accidentally opened the hi-hat there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. See, I forgot that floor tom there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. To practice going from the drum beat, I'm going to keep these mistakes in. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I'm into it. It took me a couple of times there. So again, you might find that tricky going into the chorus and out of it as well. So make a little loop and make a point of trying to practice going from section to section. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what we got so far for this. Now where did okay, so go back to page 1. Look at the second line of verse 1 where I've written out the 2 last bars there. I'm going to start from those 2 last bars on the second line of verse 1, then play the last line of verse 1, straight into the whole of chorus 1, and then into verse 2. So you can hear how you go from the drum beat through the whole of the chorus into the next verse as well, in context, up to speed, without the microphone on. Here we go. Okay, so for verse 2, we go back to our 2-bar drum beat that gets repeated for the first line and then 3 times on the second line. And the 4th bar, we get this lovely little gap at the end again, the old 4. Instead of 4 and it's just 4 at the end. Then we go into the next line, line 3. We get back to the standard 2-bar, gets repeated another 3 times for that line. Then the last line, we get 2 bars, that pattern being played twice. And it makes sense if you've got the music out in front of you, by the way. If you find this confusing, that's because you haven't got the music out in front of you. So there we get the 2 bars there, and I've written them both out because they're both different to each other. So you can see the second bar of the last line has the big gap there, 4, not 4 and a. And then the very last bar has 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3, and then nothing. So this time he leaves absolutely nothing before going into, I think, the next chorus. Yeah, chorus 2. So again, he's using a drum fill to go into a section, but the drum fill happens to be the space, which is wonderful. So let's go straight into page 3 then. Last chorus, and we get a little bit busier now with the ghost notes. So on the recording, I'm hearing him come in with the bass drum on its own on beat 1, and then open hi-hat on the and of 2. 1 and 2, and then he starts the hi-hat upbeat pattern again. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and a. You could play 1. Doesn't matter, no one's going to hear the difference, but that's the subtlety of Steve, is that he comes in on the and to give that accent perhaps a little bit more prominence. 1 and 2 and a 3. And we got the there, the ghost note on the of 2. Bar 2 standard stuff, bar 3, same as we had in chorus 1 I believe. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4. 3 and 4 preceded by a 3 and 4 on the snare. And then bar 4, an idea we've also done as well. 1 and 2 and the E and 4. Snare drum popping out on the E of beat 3, but this time this line doesn't end with an open hi-hat. 1 and 2 and the E and 4 and. Next line, this is where the first time I hear it, obviously, and I think he does this quite a bit throughout the song, but this is when it first pops out. It's where he plays the ghost notes both on the of 2 and the E of 3. 1 and 2 and the E and 4. And this is a lovely little drum beat to practice. By the way, if I was to choose one drum beat to be able to play through this entire chorus with a ghost note pattern, this is the bar I choose, or I try to teach a beginner or intermediate drummer, because it's it just works. So 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and a 3. You can get this one ghost note pattern down, then this could do you for the whole of the chorus. Two and a 3 E, a 3 E, a 3 E and a 3 E and 4 and 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. So a little bar there. And then the next bar we get 1 and 2 and the E and 4. Again, the E of snare drum popping out, E of 3 popping out on the snare drum. And then this is cool, bar 3. Again, I'm sure he does it a few more times, but it's so quiet I couldn't hear any, but I heard it this time. It's a drag going into beat 3. 1 and 2 and a 3, a 3. It's a little double left hand there, a 3, but then a 3E, a 3E. He plays a single ghost note afterwards, a 3E, a 3E and 4 and. Let's loop that bar a few times. That's a really cool drum beat. 1 and 2 and a 3E and 4 and 1 and 2 and a 3E and 4. Really, really nice. And then for the 4th bar, I think he plays 1 and 2 and which I know he plays that bit, but then I think he plays 3E and 4 and. Again, it's the E and I'm not so sure about. It could just be and 4 and, but I think he plays 3E and 4 and. 1 and 2 and a 3, missed it. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and that was very quiet. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and. But it's supposed to be, it is quiet. A 3, a 3. You don't really hear the E of 3, E and, sorry. You don't really hear the E of 3 because of the technique he's using to how most drummers play a double. You naturally get this, the first note, sometimes you don't even hear it accidentally. So again, it's the technique that's making the dynamics work for it. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1. And again, open hi-hat there at the end of the bar. And into the third line where we get a previous pattern we just practiced in bar 3, but this time the ghost note on the E of 3 isn't a ghost note, it's played at the normal volume of the snare drums on 2 and 4. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4. Probably my favourite drum beat, bar of drum beat, my favourite. Not the best one that works, but my favourite one to play during the choruses. 1 and 2 and a 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and a 3E. Instead of a 3E, it's a 3E. It's exactly the same, but we play that snare drum on the E at a normal volume. 1 and 2 and a 3E and 4 and. Bar 2 standard stuff. Bar 3 has the snare drum on the E of 3. 1 and 2 and 3E and 4 and. Then bar 4. 1 and 2 and and again he uses this gap thing where he doesn't play the bass drum on 3, we come in on the and of 3, and 4 and, just and 4 and with the open hi-hat at the end, and 4 and 1. Then the last line we get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the same for bar 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Bar 3, notice it's 3 bars long, we get the open hi-hat at the end, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I almost missed it on the recording because it's so quiet, but I'm sure that there's an open hi-hat there, so he goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. And I accidentally played the bass drum. You'll find I might do this mistake as well. When I went into the groove, 1 and I played the on the bass drum instead of the hi-hat. So yeah, you might find you do that accidentally as well. Let me do it for you properly, and then we'll play up to speed. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and I missed the hi-hat opening. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, so before we finish, I'll play up to speed. Let's go back to page 2. I'm going to start from the beginning of the very last line of verse 2. We've got those 4 bars with the variations in. Then we're going to go into chorus 2 on page 3, all the way to the end of the song, play the last 2 bars or so. Up to speed. Here we go. Right. And then you can see for what I've written as the drum outro, it's just that 2-bar pattern being repeated all the way to the end of the song, or it starts to fade out on the second line around the third repetition of those 2 bars. So Steve plays out the song as well into the distance, you hear it fade out. So if you've got any questions about any of that, feel free to email me, rob@drumstheword.com. Don't forget to download the free full PDF drum chart for this lesson, for this song, from my website. You'll find a link beneath this video. And then you might also want to consider signing up to become an online member at drumstheword.com. And what I currently offer for $97 is a full year's access from the day you sign up to every single full video song lesson I've ever recorded and transcribed. That's over 350 famous and popular songs at the moment and counting. Just like this lesson, I teach you every single bar from start to finish, every fill. You get the full PDF drum chart, and like I said, I've got over 350 famous and popular songs. As a thank you for signing up, I give you hundreds of little videos teaching you many, many famous drum beats, fills and drum solos. I give you 3 ebooks containing, guess what, hundreds more famous drum beats, fills and drum solos. And then over the year of your subscription, you also gain instant online access to all the new material that I upload to my members. And I record every week unless I'm ill or on holiday. So you've got lots of cool stuff to look forward to over the year of your subscription. But if you've got any questions about any of that, feel free to email me, rob@drumstheword.com. Go over to Facebook page if you want to make some song suggestions. And until our next drum lesson together, toodle pip and happy drumming to you.